in all the discussions that I have seen so far. Please keep in mind that brutality in some form or the other has occurred before this recent public outrage at the end of the past year, which brought the country to a standstill. And it has continued after this public outrage, although the wheels of the country had begun to turn again. It is possible the reasons that these couplets have not been discussed is because they are religious texts. Some public media channels of distribution may not be able to discuss this matter openly. Since I've always believed that society as large, has the ills it tolerates, the option of silence is no longer valid. The reasons for this brutality, and persistent brutality at that, are as appalling as the brutality itself. Unless the underlying causes are removed, the situation cannot improve. Will the world get sensitized to this? The more sensitized we get, the more this horror will grow. I believe the time has come to highlight this and other atrocities in religious texts and shame the readers into rejecting those words, no doubt inserted to, quote, control, unquote, women during the time where all women were considered fodder for the Muslim rulers. Please keep in mind that sati, or the custom of burning the widow in the pyre of the dead husband, a custom illegal since the 1800s, was a practice that developed only during Muslim rule in India. The women at that time preferred to burn themselves alive on their husband's pyre than to be subjected to the abduction and rape by the Muslim men who believed, as rulers, all women are their legitimate wives. Sati was unknown in India before the Muslim era. I support my words with the sati that occurred as recently as 1970s. The girl, a widow, was 17 years old. Her parents considered the girl's in-laws to be murderers, forcing her to become sati, quote-unquote become sati, as the phrase is used in the cultural context, thereby saving the family the, quote, disgrace, unquote, of having a young widow in the house. The parents of the girls filed complaints in the legal system. They took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of the murderers. The plea being that the girl loved her so much, her husband so much, that she chose to, quote, become sati, unquote. Her sati had become a huge event, with hordes of people coming to see the goddess or Devi, as a young widow is now being involved to becoming by social pressure. Her photo was put on postage stamps. The police treated her as a goddess. 2. Not one of them enforced the law. Sati is illegal and has been illegal since the 1800s. Sati is intense social pressure. The victim is drugged, so she doesn't feel the agony very much. There are elaborate rituals constructed around the death atrocity. If the drugs failed and the victim began to run away, often she would be thrown back into the flames. Fortunately, the young girls born after this atrocity would not consider the alternative of sati or self-immolation as a path of dealing with the death of the husband. However, just as the feeling of caste exists even after caste as a practice was made illegal with its own word coined, casteism, the feeling of sati exists after the custom of sati is made illegal. Over 50% of the deaths of women in India today are suicides. Scriptural texts, myths, epic, and story affect us at a deep subconscious level. Additionally, they have parameters and instructions at a very basic conscious level. The treatments and the actual instructions on the treatment of women are not at a subconscious level. They are very palpable and very real in our conscious world. On review and in deep thought over time, I see the treatment of women in both the texts, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, as grossly substandard. The women are tortured and abused. Sita, the wife and queen of Rama in the Ramayana, in effect committed suicide. She was disgusted by the humiliation she had to endure in her husband's court and in this society in his kingdom. She buried herself in the earth, returning to her, quote, Mother Earth, unquote. Hindus to this day say it was her karma. Draupadi in the Mahabharata was dishonored in public, won as a bet in gambling, and sold as a bet in gambling. Her additional dishonoring was her being denuded in public in the royal court when the court was in full session, and in the presence of the king and his advisor, an old sage, Bhishma, who taught morality and ethics to the king and his kingdom. I'm not exaggerating here. That was his job, teaching morality, ethics, and governance to the king. What saved her was the Godhead Krishna, who gave her a blessing in the form of protection, and the cloth or sari that was wrapping her did not end during her dishonoring. Understandably, this is symbolic. However, this does not change the depth of the dishonoring and its disgrace. Their intention of dishonoring her remains that she had extra powers since she was in her menstrual period, and in prayer when she was dragged by her hair to the court to be further dishonored by being denuded in the full court in public is a separate consideration. This is to prove to the readers that a woman, when blessed, cannot be humiliated. This is not the reason why the men wanted to humiliate her. According to the text, Draupadi cursed at the moment when the gods began to dishonor her and pull her sari from her body. And her curse was, any country that cannot respect their women will never prosper. This is important to acknowledge. India is in a difficult balance. The atrocities against women are increasing in frequency with the anger expressed at a national level. A year or so ago, before the bus incident, a woman was beaten up for going to a bar in the state of Karnataka. She was 34 years old. She was with friends. The entire episode was caught on a citizen's video. The men at the bar were unable or unwilling to protect her from the attackers. Again, it became a national issue with Delhi and the central government being involved. I repeat, society has ills it tolerates. The habit, quote unquote, habit of denuding a woman in public has happened on repeated occasions in the Indian subcontinent culture. The public reaction of seeing a woman thus humiliated is informed by the story of these epics and their text. These epics are repeated yearly on TV rebroadcasts, as well as in story form, informally, and at cultural venues where culture is propagated in all countries. At one level, it may be the practice of Schadenfreude. At another, it is an instruction on how to live, what parameters are placed on society, and how to uphold these values in their moral and ethical preferred messages of the texts. Regarding the offensive couplet from the Gita, let us ask these very relevant questions, since so many people read the Gita daily. Number one, how many people reading the Gita skip the couplet? How many people reading the Gita, the couplet, and attempt to disregard it as, quote, of the times when the Gita was written, unquote? How many people read that couplet and believe it to be true? A method for solution. This is my takeaway. 21st century updated copies of the Gita, at least in America. We are unable to influence the laws of India directly. The advantage of making a law in which all American copies of the Gita circulated in America must have the couplet removed before circulation is obvious. Now, this isn't that bold a step, because there are over 3,500 copies of the Gita. The original Gita was very thin, but everyone, when they become a philosopher or they become very wise, they write their version of Gita. The president, when he retires from the Rashtrapati Bhavan, or the Indian version of the White House, he turns around and then he writes his version of the Gita. So there are so many. In fact, there's one in Fairfield, Iowa, written by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, including the couplet that I want to see removed. That is still there. And it's being sold right here in Fairfield. So the changing and removing that would be not that far out. It's not like a book, the Gita is not a kind of a book that doesn't have interpretations. Keep in mind that the entire world is influenced by American culture. This influence is true in one form or the other. Having a 21st century American edition will, on one hand, make the readers question the older copies, and on the other hand, increase the ownership of the American version. The effect will be the proverbial ripples after a stone is thrown in a still mirror-like lake surface. It will take a while for the ripple effect to be permeated and cemented in the culture of the lake, but it will occur over time. In the meantime, the women in India have only one recourse: learn self-defense. The glimmer of an uprising, beginning light in the horizon is there. We have to only block the darkness step